Welcome to your next home. This is the perfect room if you're looking to expand the family. It's perfect. There's a kids' room or a playroom.
Did you say playroom?
Yeah, playroom.
It's not been very bad.
You know what, let me give you a moment. I'm gonna feed the pancake.
Yeah, you go feed the...
Tips for dealing with the bank. So perhaps you're renting in a property where it is run by a body corporate.
Understanding the basic calculation, income minus expenses, and you want to be left with a positive income.
It is a very tough game. It's not easy at all.
To stay ahead of knowing exactly what your clients need, what their teething issues are.
Have a joint move-in inspection.
That a lot of people that are coming into sectional title homeowners associations are, just like you described, not only first-time homeowners, but first-time owners and residents in community schemes.
They get to see the perspective from the other side of the aisle. And I think that's a really important thing to do.
It's a market that's estimated to be transacting at least 9 billion rand per year. So it's a huge market.
In order to get there, you need to be able to build up a track record.
Your cash flow model needs to be sharp.
A quote comes to mind. The best time to buy a property was about 10 years ago. The next best time is now.
Good evening and welcome to episode 60 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Uzamanto Kumalo. It's the Monday edition of the show. I do hope that you've had a great weekend, got some rest, tried to stay as much as far away as possible from emails and, responding to work texts. I know a lot of us are quite overwhelmed right now with work creeping into our weekends and having to deal with a lot of work obligations outside of normal working hours. Well, thank you very much for tuning into the Private Property Podcast. It promises to be another great episode where we're talking different things when it comes to property. And this evening, we're looking at where to get the best stats when it comes to, whether you're looking to buy or to sell your property. And to help us better understand this, I'll be joined this evening by Annette Evans, who's a general manager at the Institute of Estate Agents South Africa. So that is, of course, if you're looking to buy or to sell and you don't really know where to go to get the best data to help you, navigate how you even set the right price or what you should be looking at, and you don't even know what to do with that data the moment you have gotten it, and why making data-driven decisions is so beneficial. This is certainly the episode that you don't want to miss, because you want to learn as much as you possibly can about making the right decisions driven by data. But before we start this evening's competition, we of course always want, or this evening's show rather, we always of course have competition at the top of our heads, as you can see. And as many of you know, I do enjoy giving away money right here on the Private Property Podcast. And this week we've got a new competition that will be running, of course, for the next 2 weeks. And in this competition, we want to hear about your city, your town, or the neighborhood that you live in. And you, of course, stand a chance of winning one of two 1,000 Rand prizes. And all you have to do to stand a chance of winning that prize is to drop your name and, the name of the city or town or neighborhood that you are in, and tell us what you love most about the city, your town, or your neighborhood, and your favorite hangout spots or the different activities that you enjoy about that town. And of course, you can also do tag a friend and let them also share their details as well. And the best way that you can enter that competition is to follow the link below. We have posted it right here, whether you're watching us on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, then just follow the prompts on that particular link. And all what you learn much about your favorite town, city, or neighborhood. And of course, you stand a chance of winning one of 2 1,000 Rand prizes. The winner will be announced on the 17th of July. And as usual, the winners are picked at random, and you'll get to hear a little bit about what they like about their town right here on the show. So all the best to all of you watching us at home as you enter the competition. We love reading your stories, so please do keep sharing them with us. But to kickstart this evening's competition, or rather this evening's show, you can see that I'm so excited about competitions and giveaways. Certainly to kickstart this evening's show, of course, I did say if you're looking to buy or to sell your property and you're not really sure where to get the best data to help you make your decision, then you certainly do not want to miss this one. And I'd like to welcome this evening Annette Evans to help us better understand how to make the best decisions out of the data that we're going to find. Annette, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me again. It's wonderful to be on your podcast. Thank you.
And I think, you know, so I think one of the first starting points, before we even look at, you know, what you do with the data and why it's so important, let's perhaps look at, you know, where are people going to find the data? Because I think one of the very big things that we certainly, you know, emphasize right here on the Private Property Show, Private Property Podcast rather, is the importance of not making a property decision just based on emotion. And really doing thorough research, whether it is going to privateproperty.co.za, reading the advice section and finding out different ways, whether it's applying for a bond, the importance of a bond originator. But of course, there are different, you know, things that are also involved in making the best property decision. And that's, of course, where, you know, data-driven decision-making essentially comes from. So where exactly can people find some of this info? I mean, the different kinds of places where they can certainly access it.
Okay. Yes, definitely. What I would like to just mention to you as well is that usually you would as a valuer, you would do something called a comparative market analysis. Yes. And what that really comprises of is pretty much, and I'm just going to give it you a complete nutshell, is that you would be looking at what is on the market, okay? You'd be looking at what has recently sold, and then you would be looking at also generally something between the two, or what you can afford. And so what I would like to just say that anybody considering where they get the data from is they need to look at it and be as objective, is exactly what you were saying, be objective about the information. Don't be too emotional about the information. And then you actually need to drill down. So one of the best places I think, for example, is on your portal. You've got to look and see what exactly is on the market for the type of property. So in other words, you've got to compare apples and apples. So you would be able to get that information, find out what's on the market, but also one of the best ways to actually see what's happening in the area you're looking at is actually, believe it or not, is a municipality databases. So often they will show you what's happening in the area. And then there's what we call deeds office data. So the deeds office data gives the information of what has actually sold and got registered through the deeds office. Okay, now that applies to sellers and buyers, as you mentioned earlier. Did you want to ask? Sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, I actually then wanted to ask, where do people get this data? Because I think, I mean, I certainly have used some of the data that you've, pointed to, and find it quite useful in assessing whether I think, the asking price is at the right market level, because I've certainly been able to compare what the comparative properties in that area have sold for. So getting a sense of whether I'm getting a good deal, but also getting a sense of whether the municipality has valued it at a certain point, and let's say it's selling at 60% above what the municipality has valued it for, or under. And we'll speak a little bit later about the benefits of using this data, because I think it's also so important for us to understand why we want to be able to use data when we're making decisions, whether we're buying or certainly when we're selling. So where are people getting, some of this data? I mean, you've certainly said it's important to compare apples to apples, and you can go onto privateproperty.co.za and, filter the search, so you'll be able to at least see, okay, 2-bedroom apartments in Centurion are averaging at X amount. But that's just the first step. And then you can get, obviously, the municipal data or do a wind deed search. But where do people actually get that? Because I think some of them probably are not as freely available as others.
Exactly that. So you've got the websites that you mentioned. For example, you've got the wind deed, and you've got SAPTG. You've got other sites called Tivit, which is it's actually a subsidiary of theirs, and then you've also got Lightstone. I manage a system, but it's in the Western Cape currently, which is PropStats. And exactly what we show people is you need to see how much, what we were talking about is what something's on the market for isn't what it's going to achieve. So we compare that information, and I think that is very critical. And also speaking to the estate agent in your area, because I do think that if you're buying or you're selling, you need to be able to get reliable information, and you need to be able to build that relationship where you can say, okay, I like that street, I like that area, and find an agent that is very active in that area. And then they will give you the stats and actually talk you through it. Because what's very important when you value a property is you can't see the view, you can't see maybe the condition, you can't see the pros and the cons of something written on a piece of paper. So you need somebody in that area who's an area specialist to be able to give you a little bit more information, obviously, than you could see if you just drove past something, for example.
And perhaps then, Annette, let's look at, the difference between the kind of data that you would be interested in when you're a buyer versus when you're a seller. Perhaps let's start with, certainly those who are buying. We know a lot of people who are watching the Private Property Podcast have an interest in buying, have an interest in growing their property portfolio and learning certainly as much as they can by watching the show, in helping them make the best decision. So in the event where you're a buyer, whether you're looking to buy your primary residence or certainly looking to expand your property portfolio, what kind of data are you essentially looking out for, and what is it essentially meant to tell you as you're looking at the data?
So very much when you are looking to buy, you have to consider, for example, the facts and the figures behind the scenes. So when you would need to then add a lot of costs on, and what is very critical is you getting the property. For example, let's say you're buying for 500,000, then you're saving yourself let's say on transfer duty, but you're going to have a look at all the other costs that you would need to do research. And I always suggest people look at the investment houses, the big banks. They often have the figures written there. So you go to your own bank and you would need to then ascertain what other costs you're going to have to consider. So one of them could be renovation. There's also bank fees. You're going to have to pay ongoing mortgage fees. So you're going to have to look at your lifestyle and take those figures into consideration. I mean, I've written something here, for example, which I think is quite important, is if you're paying rent today of say 5,000 Rand, and then you buy something and it's going to cost you 6,000 Rand. Yes, initially you will outlay more every month, but there will come a time when you will actually be outlaying less, because in a year or 3 you will have started to pay off some of the capital, and you will actually be paying less than you would if your rent was increasing every month. So those are quite important figures that I think people need to be critical of, that they actually look at to see what is the cost of ownership, and also what other fees they may need to pay, such as levies. And they need to actually be very clear that they go and find that information and then actually accurately capture it to see if it's viable for them as well.
And so, Annette, in the event where they also, and this is again for buyers, are they certainly able to get date? Because I'm almost thinking of some of the different stats that I've certainly read up, perhaps zooming in, and I'm putting on now my investor hat, because I'm sure a lot of people are also just thinking as investors. Where do we get, for example, data that tells us or that gives us a really interesting picture about a particular area? So perhaps not just looking at that one property that you're looking at, but you essentially wanting to look at, let's say, the Centurion region in its entirety, or a particular portion of Centurion, and you want to essentially compare it to, let's say, a different part of Pretoria. Where would we be getting, data like that? Because I certainly know a lot of investors, especially the ones who are still starting off, sometimes don't quite know how to do a comparison for different places where they want to buy. So they've probably already decided what their investment strategy is going to be when it comes to property, which is something that we always say, you need to decide from the onset. And they're now researching different areas to potentially, invest in and buy properties in. So where do property investors or property entrepreneurs essentially go to access data for an area as opposed to just that one property?
So you can buy suburb reports, and a lot of these databases that we mentioned, I would advise them to do suburb reports and actually go in and then actually have a look for, especially when you're buying in sectional title, the advantage you have is that you're looking at square meterage. So that's usually quite a clear indicator of what you're getting per square meter that you're paying for. But you may find, for example, in Cape Town, you have, well, in most areas, you have a very new block and you have an older block. So the older block will offer a value, where the newer block are offering a lot more in the facility, in terms of facilities. They will have, they may have a gym, they may have a swimming pool. So that is a whole comparison that they need to do. And when they know their area, which is exactly what you're saying, they need to buy those suburb reports. So you will get from Windeed and Lightstone, SAPTG. I think those would be a very good place to start. Get a suburb report and then become familiar with the blocks, that they're looking in their target area. Because you've got to be, as you said, you've got to be very careful that you understand what you're buying. You would never, even nowadays, people are putting in offers sight unseen, but the conditions they are putting in is that they will see the property before they actually take any, the actual offer gets taken to the next level. And I think for people viewing this podcast today, that is really important, that they understand that they can do that, and that the attorneys and the agents will help them do that. And that means that they can get a very good idea now what they're putting an offer in for example, if they see something, but they can still view it before the offer actually gets taken as actually confirmed sale.
And I actually quite like that tip, Annette. I've certainly seen during this lockdown period a number of investors putting in that suspensive clause in their offer to purchase, where they are making the offer but saying that it's subject to them viewing. And we certainly saw that, often it was during level 4 and even the early stages of level 3, where we could not move certainly as freely as we're currently able to move, and some still aren't able to access certain properties because of restrictions in terms of accessing those properties. So they're certainly putting in the suspensive clause to say, look, we're definitely going to go find the bank finance, whatever the case is, but this is still subject to viewing the property, and in the event where they're unhappy with what they eventually see, then the offer to purchase is essentially going to fall flat, which is really a tool that we're seeing that we're able to now start using, especially as we don't know how long we're going to be staying in lockdown, and certainly level 3, or how things are going to be progressing in the coming weeks. And if we're going to go for a quick break, and when we come back, I want us to look at certainly from the seller's side, certainly the value that as a seller you get from these reports, where you should be going also for those reports, and what kind of data you're then as a seller looking for as you're going through the different reports from the different service providers. If you're watching us at home, then do send us your questions and comments when it comes to making the right data-driven decision when it comes to property, whether you are uncertain about how to set the right price point, or uncertain whether the price point that's been set is the right one, then you certainly want to find out where you can go to find it, but also how you can use data to make the best decisions. We'll be back with Annette Evans just after this. Welcome back to episode 60 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Zama Khumalo. This evening, we're talking about where to get the best stats when you're looking to buy or sell a property, and to help us better understand even what to do with the stats and how it can be beneficial for us. I'm joined this evening by Annette Evans, who's the General Manager for the Institute of Estate Agents South Africa. Now, Annette, before we took the break, we're certainly looking from a buyer's perspective, the different places that you should also be considering, looking at things like the municipal data, and certainly looking at the deeds office data, and perhaps even accessing, service providers like your PropStats or even your Lifestone. So now let's perhaps explore when you are a seller. And especially given, the time that we're finding ourselves in right now, oftentimes, people, when they comment about property prices, they always say, sometimes it's just a thumbs up. It's about where the market is. One moment, one owner can say, I'm selling it for X amount, and, the owner down the road might sell it for either substantially more, substantially less. And so even setting the price, I think, as the seller yourself, because you probably have never really done it. You're not a property professional, but you certainly think that your property might be valued at X amount, or you're thinking this is the amount that I want to get for my property because I don't want to make a loss. When I bought it X number of years ago, I bought it for this amount, so I want to at least make some kind of return. So there's always just a lot going through, a seller's minds, and different considerations that they have to make before they sell their property. Perhaps let's look at what kind of data would be useful for a seller, before they probably speak to an estate agent, or as they are having a conversation with their estate agent.
I think one of the critical things that I've experienced in any case is when somebody's selling, they obviously have this image of their house and what it's valued at. And they need to be also very realistic, not only about their own property, but what they're going to be moving to, and actually analyze those figures. A little bit like I said about the buyers, you need to sit down and have a hard look at the figures. One of the things that you need to do when you are selling is look at also what it's going to cost you. For example, you need to give the bank 3 months interest notice to cancel your mortgage bond. That's quite a big figure if you haven't taken that into consideration. That's just a little tip from my side. But what's really important is they need to look and be objective about their property value. Look at the data very much the same as I said to the buyers, but when they look at the costs, what they've got to look at is perhaps the reduction, the cheeky offers, as you mentioned a little bit earlier. Somebody could come in and give them, the average in the country is used to sit at about 7 or 8, 9%, that they would achieve less than asking price. So they have to be realistic about what they're asking. And it's a good idea to actually be as impartial as you can about what your property has got and the condition of it. Most people will often say, well, I need a new kitchen, I need a new bathroom, and you could say, well, I did it 2 or 3 years ago. But at the end of the day, that's usually what somebody's coming in is going to want to have a look at. So I always say to people, if they are selling, a lot of people improve their properties, but they need to look at what the properties are on the market for and how does theirs compare with it. Very, very, objectively. I think that's really a critical point that I can make to them.
And where are they finding then that data? Is it the same as where the buyers are looking for their data?
Yes, I would say it is the same. They have, what they would have is, as an owner, they would have a municipal valuation, and usually all of your municipalities are slightly different. But for example, we can go in and have a look at all the recent sales in our area on the actual municipal valuation roll. So I think that's quite a big tip for everybody. And then you've also got property statistics like Stats SA, for example, that tell you what is happening in the summary of what is happening in the economy, to give you an idea of what the changes are and the growth in the market itself.
Of course, we are taking your questions and comments at home. If you certainly want to find out more about making the right data-driven decision when it comes to, property, and whether you should be expanding your property portfolio, how to go about expanding it, the right price point if you're looking to sell, then do send them through. And if we've got a question here coming in from YouTube, it is Bonginkosi Magama, who asks, without asking the agent, where else would you check to find out how long the property has been on the market?
That's a difficult one because usually that is the information that the agency has on it. But often if you go onto private property, it will tell you when it was listed. It'll actually show you how long ago it was listed, usually. And I sometimes even go into Google and I Google the address, and then it will show me if there's been other listings. But that is not a reliable source, but there are often that information is sitting there.
And I think another, and I like that first tip there, Annette, that certainly when you go to private property, you're able to see when it was initially listed. But another tip, and certainly that we share quite a lot here on the Private Property Podcast, is start creating an alert for the different areas that you're interested in right now, because then what you essentially will get is regular emails when new properties in that area are on the market, when the price is reduced in a particular area, and that really does empower you in terms of making or assessing how long a particular property has been there for, because then you're also able to scale down your search to, it must be from, let's say, 500,000 to 800,000, must be a 2-bed, it must be in Centurion, and then you get those alerts, and you're able to then also see, oh, this house was actually came in my inbox, let's say 6 months ago, and here it is coming again in my inbox. So you're able to certainly make that assessment. Another question coming in, Annette, this one coming in from one of our regular viewers, who is Mogezi Mukumane, who asks, in the offer to purchase agreement, where should that subject to the buyer's viewing clause be stipulated?
They would have to have it added. So it would be a comment added within the general clauses to be added. So it wouldn't fit into the actual offer to purchase as it stands now, because it's not a standard condition. So they would need to add it and request that it gets added. That's quite important. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, and I think certainly, Mogezi, I think one thing that actually came up as I was even reading your question is, we'll certainly do an episode that looks at the offer to purchase agreement. I'm sure there's quite a lot of confusion when it comes to it, what goes into it, what perhaps doesn't go into it, the kind of information that should be stipulated upfront within the agreement, the kind of clauses that you would typically find, and the kind of clauses that would be helpful certainly as an investor. Because I think a lot of us, sometimes you want to find the capital, you're still structuring your deal, but you don't want to lose out on this particular property, but you do need, a couple of weeks to get your ducks in a row. So we'll certainly, put an episode aside and do an episode that looks at the offer to purchase and the different ways that one could navigate it, but also to better understand that offer to purchase. It can be quite an intimidating document. I know certainly the first time I had to, read one and, fill in one, it was quite an intimidating process. So it really will be useful for a lot of us to get a sense of how to best navigate it. We've got another question. This one is from Siso Khatile, who asks, quick question. I'm a first-time home buyer. What are your thoughts on the finance-linked individual subsidy program? Is it advisable to go that route? So that's that FLISP program.
Yes, absolutely. It's a huge benefit because you don't have to repay it. It's not a repayable bond. And I believe you can, up to certain areas, you can actually apply up to a year after you purchased a property. So there's actually no harm in doing it whatsoever. Once you've applied, obviously you've got to give all the correct paperwork. So, you may need assistance with that, or you just need, patience or assistance. But once you've applied and it's been approved, then you don't have to repay it. So it's a wonderful backup and support for a first-time homeowner to be able to perhaps, do something with it, even if it's to buy extra equipment for your kitchen or furniture. There's a way you can put it back in or add it to your home loan.
And I think as an extra benefit, we've certainly spoken about this particular subsidy. We had an episode on how a FLISP subsidy can help with buying your first home. We'll be posting the link to that episode right here below, so you can certainly catch up on it on YouTube and get a sense of how it works, whether or not you essentially qualify. It's, of course, for people who are earning between, I think, 3,501 to 22,000 rands and have a dependent. And certainly there's quite a bit of paperwork that you have to go through. You already, for example, have to have I think a bank loan that's been granted. But certainly in the episode, we talk about what the requirements are if you qualify, and the different steps that you can take in order to access that particular loan, that grant rather, in the event where you do qualify. So that's the episode that's titled How a FLISP Subsidy Can Help with Buying Your First Home. We'll certainly be posting it down here below. And yet, before we wrap up this evening's conversation, any final certainly tips for viewers at home when it comes to using data, whether it's from the municipality, whether it's from Windeed data, or even accessing, certainly when you're doing desktop research, you'll go to privateproperty.co.za, probably as your first port of call to get the best sense of even an area you're interested in and the average price in the particular area. Any tips for viewers at home when it comes to making the right decision, but by using data, and how they can be as efficient as possible as they're gathering the data that's going to help them make their property decision?
I think that being comfortable and knowing what you are aiming for is very important for no sudden surprises. And I do think that what is wonderful is what I didn't mention earlier, but this is just a thought that's come to my mind, is that if you are thinking of buying, for example, and you were to say buy your next property, because I think that's always a wonderful thing, then you've got to think, well, what would I rent it out for? And look at that as another aspect as well, because growth, obviously it's not a given, but it's pretty automatic. Eventually everything grows, and then when you want to leave, you want to rent it out, then how would you manage that, and what kind of rental would you expect? And that's another great opportunity to climb further up the property ladder with that statistic. So people should also look at the rentals in their area and see what is happening, so they can understand, because that's sometimes you can expect something and it's completely different. So it's worth becoming very familiar with that. And then I think also looking at the information in the area about transport and how they would move, for example, to their job, the pros and cons of an area. That's also very important, and something that you can get out of the system, that you look at very carefully, I think.
Annette, we're going to leave it there this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me.
And that is Annette Evans, who's the General Manager at the Institute of Estate Agents South Africa. And of course, that's all this data that you essentially need when it comes to all things data when making your property decision. Of course, do participate in the competition that we're running. We've posted the link to that competition right here below. All you have to do is tell us, about your town, your neighborhood, your city, and tag a friend, and you stand a chance of walking away with one of two 1,000 Rand prizes. We will be announcing that winner on the 17th of July, so that's next week, where the two lucky winners will find out if they walk away with that 1,000 Rand prize. Well, folks, that's it for this evening's show. We're back again tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock. Do set your alarms. We'll be talking all about property and the different ways for us to certainly make the best decisions when it comes to property and our property journey. Until then, I hope you're staying home and staying safe.
Hi, I'm Nicoline Terblanche, and I'm part of the SA Women's Hockey team. And I'm the Technical Director of Tax Hockey. And I'm also the assistant coach for the first team ladies. I moved to Ferry Glen about 5 years ago. Ferry Glen is a really safe place, and the people are really kind. Some of my friends live really close by in suburbs like Equestria and Olympus. In the morning I will wake up, make myself a cup of coffee, go for a jog in the Ferry Glen Nature Reserve, or even just in the neighborhood. It's safe, quiet, and the environment is really nice. I love Ferry Glen because I'm near the city, but I'm not in the city. I like to go to Pretoria Country Club to clear my mind on my own, to relax and just to enjoy a round of golf. In Pretoria East, we really have nice places to visit, like Menlyn Mall and Brooklyn Mall, that is really close by. There are also a lot of top schools in the area, like Pretoria Boys and Hoërskool Menlo Park. One of the most beautiful places to see the whole of Pretoria is the Fort Kapperkop viewpoint. And that's my neighborhood.